we're now in the period between Purim and Pesach, and of course everybody knows, I'm sure most people know, that there's this idea that Purim is a kind of prelude to Pesach in a sense. We could view Purim, and Chazal viewed it that way, as the beginning of light in the east. Before the sunrise, one can see a little bit of light, the morning star kind of, Ayelet HaShachar. And that's the partial Geula, the partial saving of the Jewish people. As the Jerusalem Talmud mentions, that the Geula in the future will also be step by step. So the Purim holiday was not a full redemption, but it started a redemption. And Pesach, of course, is our full redemption when we became a new nation. And the Talmud tells us that Purim is always a month before Pesach. This year, for instance, we had 2 months of Adar, so one would be questioning when is the best time to read the Megillah, first month of Adar or the second. So we follow the opinion that the second month of Adar is when we read the Megillah, as of course everybody remembers, just a month before Pesach. We read it about 3 weeks ago. So it's always a month before Pesach that we read the Megillah. The Purim is 1 month before Pesach, like a fixed time when the beginning of light in the east before the full sunrise happens. In fact, the whole Jewish year can be viewed as one long day. The summer is the more active time, is similar to the daytime, and the winter is similar to nighttime. So in the winter we don't have any biblical holidays, but we do have Hanukkah, a later holiday, which has to do with Dafka night. The mitzvah of the holiday, of course, is at night, just like, and it's in the middle of the winter. So the global night, the night for the whole year period, is the winter time. In the middle of the winter, we have the holiday when the mitzvah is at night. A little bit of light disperses a lot of darkness. All of that is well known. But I want to discuss a different aspect that I recently realized reading a certain article by Rav Henschke. There's a certain professor in Bar-Ilan University that writes very scholarly articles, and in one of his articles that has to do with Purim, actually with Megillah, I learned something on which I want to draw and build an idea that we could also view Purim and Pesach not as Purim right before Pesach, but exactly the opposite, as 2 ends of a beginning and the end kind of thing. Meaning, Pesach, of course, is the beginning of the Jewish months, the first of the months, as the Torah tells us, HaChodesh Hazeh Yelechem Rosh Chodashim, this is going to be the first month for you, the month of spring. That's our redemption from Egypt. Purim, on the other hand, is at the end of the year, the last month. That's in fact how the Shulchan Aruch, the Orach Chaim section of Shulchan Aruch, arranges everything. After it finishes with the laws of Shabbat, it goes on to the laws of Pesach, then Shavuot, then all the fasts during the summer, then Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hanukkah, and at last Purim. So from first month to the 12th month, everything is between, our whole calendar is between Pesach and Purim. So we now look at Pesach and Purim not as Purim preceding Pesach, but the opposite. Purim kind of concluding. And in fact, the whole biblical history of Israel is kind of between those 2 holidays. Israel was formed at the time of Exodus, and the book of Esther and Megillah is one of the latest books of Tanakh. Basically, the last books of Tanakh were written more or less in the same generation, maybe 1 generation later, depending on when exactly the prophets Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi lived. There's a little bit of a dispute exactly with the chronology of the last biblical prophets, but Esther definitely fits into the being almost at the very end. Chazal say that they were all part of Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, both Mordechai in the book of Esther and the latest prophets mentioned in the end of Nevi'im. So whatever the case may be, our whole biblical history is between those 2. And we have a double kind of difference, two main aspects in which Pesach is different from Purim. One in which Purim is in a way greater, and one in which Purim is of course less. So the one about which Purim is less, that Pesach is greater, everybody knows. And that's why we don't read Hallel, the Thanksgiving Psalms on Purim. And that is that on Pesach we became completely free of any yoke. We became an independent nation. On Purim, however, we're still, as the Talmud says, Akati Avdei Achashveirosh, we're still slaves of Achashveirosh. What really changed? The life of the Jewish people in exile is still hanging in that same balance. Okay, so Haman was killed. Yes, our archenemy was killed. But it's still the whim of Achashveirosh. At any time he could kill Esther if he doesn't like her. The same way as he disposed Vashti, he could dispose of Esther. The same way as he disposed Haman, he could dispose of Mordechai. We're still in exile. We still have no independence. We still seem to be totally under the yoke of the Persian Empire. On the other hand, there is a great aspect in which Purim is even greater than Pesach and the following holiday afterwards, Shavuot, which was just less than 2 months after Pesach, right? The giving of the Torah. And that is, as our sages tell us, that during the giving of the Torah, the Jews had to be forced to accept it. On Purim, however, we accepted Hashem's decree on our own. Even though the Purim miracle was a hidden miracle, the book of Esther doesn't even mention Hashem's name, but eventually the Jewish people actually did a full tshuva. And in a way, Purim might be even more important to us in a certain sense, because this is what really happened in the next over 2,000 years. Since the time of Purim till today, more than 2,000 years, 2,500 years approximately passed. And Jews are still in exile, even though a lot of Jews, maybe even close to majority, are now living in Israel, but still, we're basically in exile. And in Israel also people depend on all kinds of Achashveiroshes today. Right? The will of President Biden and whoever else often plays a great role in Israeli politics. We're still, in a certain sense, in a large sense, in exile. And whatever the blueprint that happened on Purim, Jews in exile who accept the commandments. It's the commandments that keep us, keep the divine protection for us. That's the main thing. It says in the Talmud that the Jews during the times of Haman accepted fully, did a full tshuva and accepted fully the commandments of the Torah. It's possible that in the beginning of the book of Esther, some of the Jews in Persian Empire maybe felt very comfortable, but once the danger happened, it says that the Jewish people did a greater tshuva because of the decree of Haman and Achashveirosh than whatever the biblical prophets could do for us. In fact, there is actually a different statement in the Talmud that, and in various midrashim, that while we didn't fully keep the mitzvot in the land of Israel, once we were exiled, we actually began to keep the mitzvot better. Interestingly enough, the fact is that when we were in the land of Israel, at least during the first temple times, there were about more than half of the kings were either very wicked or not very good. And under them, a lot of the commandments were not kept properly. And the laws of Shemitah were ignored many times, and that's why the land would later be empty of us to rest for all those Shmitot, like the Torah predicted. Right? The first exile to Babylon was only for 70 years, but most Jews still remained in exile, even when the decree of Cyrus the Great, the Persian king who allowed the Jews to come back, even after that decree, only the minority of Jews came back, and the majority remained in exile. And most of the Sephardi Jews, the Dota Mizrach, never really came back altogether. Some of these communities are from the time of Esther and earlier, from the time basically of the first exile. Some of the Ashkenazi Jews did come back, and then they were exiled again, of course, in the Roman times. And that's how we ended up in Italy and then in Northern Europe. But whatever the case may be, the exile and the whole time period of the Second Temple is considered still partially a time of exile. There was not much of Jewish independence either, except during the times of Hashmonaim. Before that, we were under Persians, then under Syrian Greeks. Then there was the Hanukkah miracle, and we had an independence for a short time. And then the Romans installed a Edomite king, Herod, Hordas. And after this, his descendants ruled over us. So the point is that the Jews kind of remained in exile for over 2,000 years since then. And the one thing that we have, the support that we have, is the Torah. And this is what not only keeps us together, but most importantly gives us the divine protection. Yes, we seem to be dependent on the whim of various rulers, like Achashveirosh, But we accepted the Torah, and Hashem saves us each and every time. And I hope and pray that Hashem will save us again from the terrible danger that the Jewish people are in this generation. It again comes from the Persians, and it's not that the majority of the Iranians are anti-Semitic. That's not true at all. Just like probably in the times of Haman. In the times of Haman, only a certain number were the true enemies of the Jews. But that number is enough, especially if the government supports it, that number is enough to make it dangerous for the entire Jewish people. And I hope Hashem will save us again from those wicked monsters that want to destroy us. Le'abed, le'ashmid, minar ve'ad zaken, exactly like it says in the book of Esther. So now that we're in the period after Purim, and already the month of Nisan started, the month of our redemption, right before Pesach, it's good to remember all of this. And I hope that this short video gave a little bit of opened some new understandings, just like after I read the article, it gave me a certain new understanding and approach to the relationship between Pesach and Purim. So too, maybe it will help you.